work. Uh, Screen now, and here I take you to my uh, PPT. All right, let me take you to my first PPT. Is my PPT visible? I can't follow the Zoom class. Can I just get one audio answer? Is my PPT visible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Because now I can't see the screen. I'm thoroughly into the PPT. Can you see me?
Yes, ma'am. You can proceed now.
All right. So you can see this is a so-called working title that is Feminist Criticism, Cologne Theory, Language and Literature. Now, feminist literary criticism is actually a mixture. It's a mixed bag where we have theories, where we have the language network, and where we have literature. See, as I'll take you through this journey of feminism, you will see here the moment I talk about theory, the another moment there are theoreticians, who are digging deep into this language network system, and then again you have literature. So they all would be read parallelly. All right. Now, I'm coming to my next slide, and this next slide, please, I'll just give you one hint. Please follow the slide carefully because it is going to help you at the end of your assignment. So now this is the content of the lecture, a brief mapping of what I intend to do with you people today. First of all, I would be introducing first wave feminism. All right. Now, first wave feminism actually starts from the early part of 20th century, and then it will take us to the middle of 20th century. And just immediately in the 1960s, 1960s is a very important era. Why 1960s is important? Because by 1960s, we had seen two world wars, we had seen Holocaust, and now we know that human beings are not the greatest creation of God. Okay, so by 1960s, we have a host of theories being unleashed. We have psychoanalysis, we have feminism growing into the second wave feminism, and then we have, of course, post-structuralism, post-colonialism. All right, so a lot of theory coming all together. Eco-criticism is also, a late project, but of course, one of the, I would say a byproduct of theory again, and now it is very important, it's very relevant. So 1960s is a very eventful era for theory. And here we have the second wave feminism. And as it is clearly visible from the PPT, second wave feminism would be divided into two parts. All right. First, we have the Anglo American feminists and then the French feminists. Now, please let me tell you why am I categorizing this? This is because Anglo American feminists, they dwell more with literature, and please remember, French feminists have much to do with language first and then comes literature. All right. So when it comes to French feminists, you have to understand the network of language. And French feminists, unlike the Anglo American feminists, are heavily dependent on psychologists, especially Lacan. So before realizing French feminism, we have to understand what is Lacanian philosophy, all right, of language system. So I hope by now my worthy participants have been able to understand why second wave feminism is divided into Anglo-American feminism and French feminism. And along with this second wave feminism, we have some parallel. Now, please don't think after second wave feminism comes the Marxist feminism, contemporary feminism. No, it goes side by side. Marxist feminists like Cora Kaplan, they also now evolve at this point of time. I'll be introducing Marxist feminism the moment I end second wave feminism, Anglo-American feminism. Then the fourth part of my lecture would deal with the contemporary feminism. I'll take you through that journey as well. And among this contemporary feminism, I mean that is contemporary to you, me. All right, they are. I mean, still now they are alive, and you can go and I don't. I mean, I'm sure many of you have at least heard of, not heard of, rather met Spivak. I have personally met Spivak. So now these are our contemporary feminists who again, according to me, can be categorized into three categories, three subcategories rather. First is post-colonial feminist slash third world feminist. Okay, so now they very much tell about our situation, the post-colonial women. They can be South Asian, all right? So these women, most important example is Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, okay, from Presidency College of Kolkata. And then we have black feminism, okay? We have lesbian feminism, and finally we entered into the era of post-feminist era. Now, post-feminist era is again a very important juncture and interface where you may agree or you may disagree, and I'm sure we are going to have lots of talking today. Let's talk it out. All right, regarding post-feminist era. So I myself, I'm not sure what is post-feminist era. Have we actually arrived? Because my end slide would say that we are going back to the vicious circle of, the beginning of feminism struggle. Okay, so now let me move on to the two most important participants of the first West feminist. My favorite is Virginia Woolf, and I'm sure you have heard about her. Virginia Woolf, as you see, 1880 to 1941. I mean, I had already told you that the next two, women feminists are going to be from the early 20th century till the 1960s. All right, 1960 is the borderline. I'll take you through the borderline. But first, the first woman who thought of feminism is Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. This is a very interesting essay, and I can speak on and on. I am, I'm addicted to this text personally. Pardon, I think there are some side talks. Do you want to ask something to me, participant?
Muted. I have muted, Niranjana.
Oh, okay, Christy. Okay, fine. So coming to Virginia Woolf. Okay. So now this essay was written in 1929, I guess. Yeah, 1929 was the year. I think I haven't mistaken. It is 1929, yeah. So now Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own, it is so obvious. Women, please listen to me, and I hope men are also listening to me. Woman, do you have a room of your own? Yes. Now think about your house. You are a, a cook in the kitchen. You are a host in the drawing room. You are a partner to your husband in the bedroom. You serve dishes in the dining hall. But woman, where is your study room? Where is your room where you can be just yourself, where nobody is going to come and ask you to be a host or a bed partner or a cook or anything? Is there any such space to which you can resort to for at least 2 minutes in a day? Think about it. So Virginia Woolf is actually talking about a space where you have, where you can afford some time and opportunity to write. Do you have that space, woman? I want to know. And if you are a man, have you given that space in the in your house where you have a separate study for the female member of the house? And second most important thing, very important, what Virginia Woolf points out is that to write literature, to practice literature, number one, you need, of course, a room, a space, maybe just a corner of a room, and also you need money. So now I told you I can I can go on and on with Virginia Woolf, but now I need to come to my next slide. And well, yeah, pardon. Okay, so I'll go ahead with my next slide. And now we have Simone de Beauvoir. All right. Now, Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, as you can see in the slide, this book was published in 1949. It's very popular. Almost all of us who do feminism have this particular text. 20,000 copies had already been sold in the year 1949. I mean, understand, 1949, a woman is writing about the second sex and it is being published. Because still, you must remember, in those days, women used to write under the garb of, those pseudonyms, male pseudonyms, so that society would take them seriously. But here, Simone de Beauvoir, literature is being sold, 20,000 copies, my God, in the year 1949 itself. And as the title says, the central argument of this topic is that since, since you know, human evolution, human civilization have considered woman as, I quote, the second sex, the other. Okay, and there are numerous, instances. She'll be taking lots of aspects. She goes to history first, and there she says that that male have, created, this concept of second sex. And here he comes with a very wonderful idea, the idea about distinguishing between sex and gender. This is very important. Sex is biological. You are born as, of course, with a particular sex. But gender is socio-cultural construct. That is, that is how, see, it's very natural. Now you were born, all right. So your family member would say, oh, all right, now we have a boy child in home. Oh, all right, now we have a girl child in home. But the moment you have this girl child in home, immediately, I do not know how much you have felt it. Suddenly, your family members say, oh God, a girl, not a boy. Oh, why to distribute sweets today? It's just a girl after all. Even the mother doesn't want a girl. And once the girl is born, you slowly add a huge list of do's and don'ts. All right, wear your dress properly, hide your private parts properly, be always ashamed of your body, eat properly. You have to become a mother one day. All right, and all right, don't go far. Return to your home, by evening. You are a woman. You can't do this. Oh, they are man. Or they are biologically like that. Suppose if somebody abuses you, come on, something must be wrong with you. You hadn't taken the dupatta properly. Yeah. So that is where this gender comes into play. You were born as a free girl, but now you have been constructed into female gender. So remember, gendering is not natural, it's not biological. It has been created by male, but most importantly, don't just blame the male, but women who have been ideologically captured. Ideologically captured means male who love to be the object, who love to be like a male wants to see you. I mean, I'll tell you. I'll give you an example of it. See, suppose you are standing in front of a mirror. The way you dress up. Do you ever look at yourself through the mirror from your own eyes? No. You think, wow, let me dress up like this. This is what my boyfriend wants. Let me grow my hair. Maybe you are full of life. It's itching. It's very hot, but still you want long hair because your boyfriend wants it. Let me learn some cooking. All right. Let me go to the parlor. Let me beautify myself. But according to whom are you beautifying? Is it your eyes? No. You are under a pressure. You are under an anxiety that how to actually dress up which would suit, the patriarchal system. And it's not your father who always tells you. It's your mother. It's your grandmother. It's your mother-in-law who will keep on telling you, dress up like this, wear more jewelry. Come on, your father must have sent more jewelry. Where are they? All right. So you see how this politics goes on and how this politics is dangerous. But again, I told you, Buva can go on and on. And this is very important. That is the distinction between
Nilanjana,
yeah,
excuse
yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I think some disturbance is there. They are not able to hear you well. Yeah, can you keep your mic very close or something?
Oh, sure. Can you just tell me when was I last audible?
No, you were audible. The
Okay.
thing is, it was breaking. That's it.
It was breaking. Okay. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
I got so carried away. Actually, I just, how I become when I start talking. Sorry. I hope my body participants can listen to me now. Okay. So Yeah. So now this is one aspect, about the second sex. But I had already told you, Simone de Beauvoir's position is very important. She continues till 1986. So that means I had told you from 1960s begins the second wave feminism. So we have Beauvoir just at the threshold, just at the borderline of first wave and second wave feminism. This is very important. This is very important. So borderline of first wave and second wave feminism. Why? Because like the first wave, she of course, she takes up organization. See, one thing, let me make it clear. The first wave clearly talk about your political position in the world. I mean, can you beat it? Can you believe it? Even a woman did not have the right to vote. So it was so politically, where do you stand? You don't even have the voting right. So and then the divorce right. In marriage, what should be your role? What should be your role as a female partner? So there were many, and yes, at the same time, you did not have right to property. Suppose a father has two girl or one girl or whatever, five girls, like in Jane Austen's novels. So none of them are going to get that property. It is going to shift to your nearest male cousin. So in the society, you don't even have your basic fundamental rights. So in the first wave feminism, they are talking about these fundamental rights. All right. And Beauvoir also vents out these kind of anxieties. But but she is almost, foreshadowing the second wave feminist because she is also analyzing myth and literature. You see, I mean, I told you I'll be coming to literature. So she is also analyzing literature. She is deconstructing myths, and she's trying to reconstruct them back. Okay, where she wants to find a woman's peace. Right. So Beauvoir's position is very important. Remember, she is standing just at the threshold of first wave and second wave feminism. Now, moving on to my next slide, we are now entering into second wave feminism. All right, from Kate Millett, we are entering into second wave feminism. And Millett, please remember, Millett is actually a militant feminist. And of course, I'm sure when my male worthy participants are listening, whatever I'm going to say is going to bombard them. I'm sure, you know. So one thing is clear. Once you get bombarded, I'll tell you again, she has been thoroughly criticized, but you cannot negate her position. So whatever I'm going to say, please bear with a pinch of salt, because after that, again, I have, all these criticisms against her. All right. So coming to Kate Millett. And Kate Millett, as you see, the text is sexual politics. All right. This was in the year 1969. So you see, post, this is post second wave. I mean, this actually enters into second wave feminism. As I told you, this was 1960s is the year. So this was the time of civil war. All right. And here actually women are now on the streets. They are fighting for rights. An entire nation, for civil war is on the streets. So definitely, the mood, the tempo of this lady is a bit aggressive. She is a militant, and at times she is a female chauvinist. And this, of course, impetus is from the civil rights. And I'll tell you, especially to my male participants, she is an extremist. However, now coming to the central argument, why am I telling you so many things? It is because she talks about politics. She says, enough. First come to politics. Tell me, patriarchal society, what have you done to women? Where is our political right? So part by part, she analyzes politics, and she says that how male have manipulated and discriminated gender, and here she agrees with Beauvoir. But now she differs with Beauvoir. All right. She says, Kate Millett says, Beauvoir, you are talking about women written magazine. Like I'll tell you, in West Bengal, we have a magazine called Shanonda. All right. It is written by women. It is for the woman, by the woman, of the woman. But here, in this Shanonda, if you see, the first page goes like, so how are you going to keep your husband happy? You have some tips. Next tips are for your beauty tips. Third tips are how are you going to keep your interiors clean. Fourth tip may be something else. I mean, whatever it is, again, it's trying to again stereotype you and confine you to be a woman exclusively made for satisfying male intellect and and for sexual gratification and their aesthetic gratification, how to decorate a house well, how to dress up for your husband, how to cook food, how to bring a sort of spice, in your marital life. So these kind of things. So here, of course, she criticizes Beauvoir. I told you, women feminists are going to criticize each other. So here she criticizes Beauvoir and clearly says that these magazines are dangerous. In these magazines, you only think of male gaze. What is male gaze? Participant gaze is very dangerous. Gaze is like surveillance camera, it can see you, but you can't see. I mean, when you are looking through the mirror, you are thinking about some target eyes. It's never your own eyes. You are thinking about a pair of eyes which is not yours. But remember, that pair of guys is not going to think about you. Take, I don't know whether you listen to Bollywood songs or not, but think how women have been constructed in female. तुझको उठा करके ले जाएगी बद्री की दुल्हनिया. All right. Then एक लड़की को देखा तो ऐसा लगा जैसे this, जैसे that, जैसे what not. Then the famous song of दिल वाले दुल्हनिया ले जाएंगे, मेरे ख्वाबों में जो आए, आके मुझे छेड़ जाए. What do you mean by छेड़ जाए? It's a clear activity of sexual harassment. उसे कहो कभी सामने तो आए. And this woman is ready to marry her. कैसा है, कौन है, वो जाने कहाँ है, जिसके लिए मेरे होठों पे हाँ है. I don't even know the man, but I'm ready to marry this man who is coming and doing I quote Chedkhani with me in my dream. So you see, we all have, sung this Lata Mangeshkar tune so many times, and these are dangerous because they are setting examples for us. I also want to be another Kajol, because I am listening to this in my formative days. Now, I mean, this is I told you, I am a feminist for this. So women have been strategically, now coming back to Kate Millett, please come back to this lady. So coming back to Kate, she only expired, you see, in 2017, so she's quite relevant to us still now. So she actually talks about, sex object, this term that women have been time and again. You see, you see these male brands of these shaving cream, male undergarment. What does a woman have to do over there? She neither shaves over there, she never uses this undergarment. So, but here woman has been objectified as a sex object, and this is dangerous. All right, and this has to be dismantled. And you see, I'll tell you, Kate Millett goes to several places. Okay, now first she talks about anthropology, and she says that patriarchy is not the norm of the society. Of course, there are. I think you all are aware of the place Shillong where matriarchy works. All right, let me tell you, Shillong, which is in Meghalaya, their matriarchy works. There, a child will imbibe the child's mother's surname, but not the father's. Okay, so she does an anthropological study, and she shows that there are societies where women are in charge of the society. So please don't tell me, patriarchal society, that you are the be all and end all of a society. And secondly, she also goes to literature. All right. And in literature, she clearly says that, Millett points out that whenever you are writing a literature, she first blames, please, participants, I know I can't be visible anymore, but please pay attention to me. I want to, tell you one thing. Here she criticizes both male and female writers. And why is she doing this? Please listen to me. Firstly, male writers, while writing, their target audience is only male readers. All right. When you are writing, you are trying to think to quench the intellectual gratification of male readers. Dangerous. Why dangerous? Number one, because it only thinks about male readers and does not consider the female readers. And more dangerous because women writers, all right, think the first time a woman, when she is writing, she is going to imitate, get influenced by these male texts. And she's also going to fall into the trap of this trope. Trope means idea. All right. So even she also starts writing, thinking about, feeding the male readers only. So that's why it is doubly dangerous. Now, I told you Kate Millett will be criticized for this. And yes, of course, here we have a feminist. Now, here I move on to my sixth slide. Please meet Cora Kaplan. Worthy participants, let me tell you, Cora Kaplan is not a second wave feminist. Okay, she is a Marxist feminist who later, like you and I, would definitely, question Kate Millett in particular and first and second wave feminists altogether. How? See, I've tried to jot down certain points here in the right hand side. But before that, let me tell you some important criticism that Cora Kaplan had to give to Kate Millett. Number one, what she points, this is actually the fact. What Kate Millett says, Cora Kaplan says is that you, Kate Millett, you are blaming male writers and female writers of writing about women as sex objects. But don't forget, I mean, Cora Kaplan is telling this to Millett. Don't forget that literature mirrors society. Now, don't blame literature for this. Blame society. This is happening in society. That's why you are writing this in literature. Okay. So first, try to fix your society, then come and judge the literature, because writers would be writing whatever they see. They are representing the society. And secondly, this is a very important portion. And secondly, she also, Cora Kaplan says that Millett, why don't you read the subtext? All right. Now you are just reading, what is subtext for the participants? Subtext is nothing but, the hidden text, the unconscious mind of the text. So you have to read the subtext. Now, this is what she tells to Kate Millett. And here you see these points, Now she is a Marxist feminist and she says to all these feminists, the Marxist feminists, she says to Beauvoir, she says to Millett, she says to Virginia Woolf, in general, what are you doing? What are you doing? You are trying to universalize the problems of women, my God. The problem of women of Tuticorin is different. The problem of women of Uttar Pradesh is different. The problem of women of West Bengal is different. Leave alone West Bengal. The problem of even, all right, if you understand, the topology of Tamil Nadu, the problem of Madurai, the problem of women in Tuticorin, the problem of women in Chennai, they all are different. How can you homogenize and universalize this? Number one. Number two, where is class struggle? She says, hello, feminists. Feminism is actually about your economic disempowerment. Now you are going to a job, you are not given a job because you are a woman. Now you are going for a job and a male partner is getting more salary and you're not getting, and remember, they were truth. Where are these class struggles? Where is economy in your study? Because the main problem of the society is money, financial empowerment, and so is with the women. So please come back to the real world and try to contextualize their problem. The problem that you face in America may not be the problem with the women in India as far as job is concerned. So these kind of things are there. Okay. Anyway, now I come to slide number 7. I told you I'd be talking about literature. So to participants who are interested in literature, you can please come back to this slide. Now meet the two ladies. They are Gilbert and Goba. All right. Now Gilbert and Goba, they are Anglo-American feminists, as you see, and they are writing this very important book. I have this book. I wish I could have shown this book, but exactly with this cover page, The Mad Woman in the Attic. And you see the subtitle, The Woman Writer and the 19th Century Literary Imagination. Exactly so. And with this, I move on to my next slide. What are these two women doing in their text? You see this about Mad Woman. All right. And this was written in 1979. And of course, this comes under second wave feminism. Here, these two ladies, they jointly show how women have been represented. Please pay attention. How women have been represented by women themselves. all right, by women writers. And they start digging up history and they bring out suppressed women writers. Here they take up categorically Marx, all right. Here they take up 19th century British women novelists. And what do they find out? They find out that all these 19th century British women novelists, my God, what have they done? They have tried to establish patriarchy, you see, because they could not challenge patriarchy. You see, I already added these points. Number two, because they could not challenge patriarchy, their heroines conform to patriarchy. You understand? So when you find a Jane Austen heroine, you will see, you can feel them. When you find the Bronte sisters, they're writing, you will see women who are conforming to this book. But then these women had challenged. I'm telling you, these women have challenged patriarchy. But again, you have to read the hidden part. And how is this challenge? That comes to my point 3. See, they challenge patriarchy by creating anti-heroines and witches, and most importantly, mad women. Now you can see this picture. This picture is actually the representation of Bertha Mason. Remember Bertha Mason? Bertha Mason is Charlotte Bronte's, character. She is the violently insane first wife of Rochester. All right. So Rochester would be marrying for the second time, and this woman is locked in the attic. From here comes actually, the title, Mad Woman in the Attic, and she is shown as a mad woman. And through this mad woman, actually, these, Charlotte Bronte wanted to establish a woman who could protest this goody-goody woman, this goody-goody heroine. Okay. So through witches, through mad women, these writers are defying and protesting. That's this much. Now, moving on to another very important second wave feminism, and she is Elaine Showalter. She is still now alive, and she is the one who talks in very critical way. Now you see, she number one, if you see a literature of their own, that's the name of the text. Now I hope you can understand, a literature of their own is clearly actually is influenced by Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. Remember, I had started my talk with A Room of One's Own. Now, a literature of their own, here she talks about literature which is by the woman.
সুজন সাহাটা করলে সুজন সাহা
Hello?
হ্যাঁ
Christy? All right, I'll move on.
Hello.
Yeah, there's some unwanted voices, I believe. Should I move on? One audio, please. One audio answer, yes or no, something.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'll move on. All right. Can you follow me?
Yeah. Yes. We can follow you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So Elaine Showalter, yeah, and we were talking about a literature of their own, right? And here we have, she's talking about gynocriticism. All right. You have heard about gynecologist, right? What does the word gyno mean? Gyno means of feminine, it's a feminine term. So gynocriticism means by woman, for woman, and of the woman. So she's talking about a world of women writers, women readers, women critics. All right. And this was published in 1977. Very important, as you can understand. It echoes Room of One's Own. And here she identifies 3 phases. I'll just explain this to you with my next slide. The 3 phases of women writing. Can you see this? Number 1, number 2, number 3. One is feminine phase, the other is feminist phase, the second is feminist phase, the third is female phase. All right. Now I'll explain to you. Don't worry. What Showalter says is that there are 3 phases of female writers. All right. So actually, she traces a journey. You can see the time. 1840 to 1880, 1880 to 1920, then 1920 to present. All right. So slowly she says that we as women writers, we as women readers, and we as women critics are moving from incompleteness to completeness. Am I clear? We are moving through feminine phase to feminist phase, and finally we evolve when we come to the female phase. Now, feminine phase. Remember, participants, feminine phase for her is a derogatory sense. Why? Because this is the phase where we are, female writers, readers, critics, we are blindly imitating and copying the works of male novelists. That is a pejorative sense. All right? Here we are not, just aware of our own identity, our own body, our own problems, and so and so. And she set the example of George Eliot, Elizabeth Gaskell. I hope you all have heard about George Eliot. Okay, so George Eliot, Elizabeth Gaskell, they are the two women writers who belong to the feminine phase. Then she points out the feminist phase. Feminist phase is not totally derogatory, but semi-derogatory. Why semi-derogatory? Because here she talks about women who are radically protesting. All right, radically protesting against men. But Showalter says that even this is not feminism, dear. Okay, because here the moment you protest, you are actually accepting male power. Remember, suppose if you start shouting in your house at your husband, you are this, you are that, it means that you are acknowledging his presence. So still now you are not dependent on your own. You can't evolve and think on your own. You think in terms of your husband and you so keep on fighting with your husband. Okay. So the thing is that what she says is that even the feminist phase, and here she sets the example of Elizabeth Robbins. She says that, well, they are of course protesting, but why to protest? By protestation, you only accept the power. And then comes, but again, I'll tell you, this is a journey, The first leads to the second leads to the third. Now, female phase, this phase that is 1920, and it continues till now. This is what Showalter says is definitely a very important phase. An example is Dorothy Richardson. All right. So here, Dorothy Richardson, as a feminist writer, she'll be talking about a woman's space. She'll be talking about woman identity, where she is no more, suffering from this anxiety. Oh God, what am I going to do in this male world? Okay, so here she is talking about the inner recesses of female psyche. So it's not about only body. You're talking about female psyche. You are talking about, common tropes of women, these ideas of empowering women. You are finally talking about woman as a woman. All right. And of course, she sets example of women novelists of the post-50s. Now, with this, I move on to my next slide. Remember, my worthy participants, I had told you that my second wave feminism is divided into, my study of second wave feminism is divided into two parts. One is, as I have told you, they are the Anglo-American feminists, and here we have French feminists. Now, I'll tell you, French feminists, they are different. I had told you in the very beginning only. So don't mix up French feminism with these Anglo-American feminism. Now, they are, even I'll tell you, my teacher from whom I learned feminism, she criticized me. All right. So she criticized me saying that French feminists, they are people who talk inside the AC houses. All right. They don't actually go outside and work for the society. But I personally, I adore French feminists, because the way they do with the text. Yeah. So as you see, I have already pointed out French, and you see this is a small quote. Me too. I make do. I anoint. What cannot be fixed? So this is Hélène Sixtou. Hélène Sixtou, I'll come to her. She is a very important French feminist, and I am a diehard fan of hers. So French feminism is influenced by post-structuralism, psychoanalysis, and postmodernism. It is very important. And here we have certain important French feminists. I'll be taking all of them: Julia Kristeva, Sixtou, and Irigaray. But before that, let me take you to that particular person who has influenced French feminism. Oh yes. So this is Lacan. Have you met Lacan? Well, here he is, Lacan. Now I'll tell you who is Lacan. Lacan is a psychoanalyst. Now, I think you have heard about Freud, all right? So Freud is a psychoanalyst whom women cannot tolerate. I mean, feminists do not tolerate, especially the French feminists. Why? Because of his concept of penis envy. Yes, penis means the male private organ, penis. All right. And what Freud had said is that the moment a girl child realizes that she does not have a penis, so she starts suffering from an anxiety, from an absence. And from there starts a woman's a sort of inferiority. And of course, feminists never took this idea. Rather, they prefer Laka. All right. Now, why am I talking about Laka? Because here Laka would be talking about the three stages of language. Okay. First, let me discuss these three stages of language. Then I will say why feminists have tried to be, why have accepted this part. All right. Now, please see the three stages of life. Actually, this is the three stages of language system. According to Laka, number one is imaginary state, number two is mirror state, and the third is symbolic state. Now, I'll simplify this for you. The moment a child is born, okay, an infant is born. Now, up to 6 months of age, it dwells in this imaginary state. And then from 6 months to 18 months, this child dwells within the so-called mirror stage. And finally, after 18 months, he or she enters into the symbolic state. Now, what is this? I'll explain. Now, please, this explanation is very important because if we do not understand this, we will not be able to understand French feminism. So please remember imaginary state, mirror state, symbolic state. And remember, imaginary state is, the initial months, up to 6 months, mirror state 6 to 18 months, and symbolic is after 18 months, and it goes on. Okay. What happens in imaginary state? Now, this child, it is aware of its identity, but it is also aware of its inseparable bond with its mother. You can understand, now by up till 6 months, like you have heard exclusive breastfeeding and all. So biologically, the child is attached to the woman. Okay. And then follows the mirror state. So what happens in imaginary state? The child identifies itself, be it a boy or a girl, you will see he or she is very much attached to his or her mother. Okay. And now comes the mirror state. Now, of course, mirror state means when a child first looks at, this is not the first time the child is looking at the mirror, but for the first time, once the child looks at the mirror and starts identifying itself. All right. Identifying itself, and the moment a boy and a girl looks at the mirror after 6 months, they try to locate the difference. All right. They become aware of their own body, and they become aware of the other body as well. So mirror stage is the stage when, a child moves on to realize that he or she is a boy or a girl. Not a very clear-cut idea, but at least some idea. And finally, you have this symbolic stage. This symbolic stage, is the moment when you enter into the language system. Right. After 18 months, a child starts, slowly babbling things out. And remember, while babbling things out, please remember that from 6 months, it has been hearing things. The doctor says, please say something good in home. All right, say something good in home because your child is listening. You think your child is not listening, but your child is actually listening. So your child goes on listening to this mirror state, and suddenly the child starts speaking out, in small, broken babbles by the age of 18 months. And that is the time you enter into this network of language system. So please remember, dear participants, the child, even before entering the language system already exists. The language system was already there. Okay. So, and this language system is typically phallocentric. Phallo means of the father. This is the language of the power. This is the language of the father. All right. And here Laka says it's not just phallocentric, but also says it's phallogocentric. Phallocentric means language of the father. And phallogo, and because in the imaginary stage, you were responding to the language of the mother, the warmth of the body, the babbling, the lullabies of your mom. So that's the way you were thinking. But by symbolic state, now you're talking in prose. You are talking, you are accepting the language which is already there. And when this is a phallocentric word, this is also in the symbolic state of phallogocentric word. What is phallogo? Logo, L-O-G-O. Logo means idea. Means you are not only entering the language, but you're also entering the idea system. So in this way, unknowingly, you move on to this world of patriarchal domination. Now, this is the place. This is the place Kristeva and Sikstu would be very much interested in. So, moving on to this particular. See, I have this. I have this PPT for you. If you can kindly see this. See how human unknowingly enter into the man-made language network. All right. So we have, see, the imaginary state where it is pre-linguistic, pre-Oedipal, and then you have the mirror state where the moment when the infant learns to identify with his or her image in a mirror, and start separating. Oh, I'm something which the girl is not. I'm
Dr.
something.
Nilanjana,
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
this is Benison. Sorry for the interruption.
Yes, sir. Please, please.
We are getting the feedback that the voice is not audible. Can you do
Okay.
something from your side?
Yes, yes. I'm trying to again.
Kindly.
Am I audible right now, sir? Am
Okay,
I audible?
you keep on talking. You are audible, but very less. That's the thing.
Okay, okay. Right now, is it working right now?
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm trying to take the mic as close as possible to my mouth so that I don't eat it right now.
Kindly. Sorry for the disturbance.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for keeping me alive. Thank you. Yeah. So thank you, sir. So coming back to my this present slide. So how human unknowingly enter into this man-made language, and finally we enter. You see the symbolic stage where I have clearly mentioned after the acquisition of the language, you now enter into the world where the law of the father operates, and this is where Helen Sixtu, uh, comes to sort of adore Laka. All right, now Laka is not a feminist. Laka is a psychoanalyst, but I introduced Laka and this 3 stages of a child's entering into the language system because this is where Sixtu is specially interested. All right. Now coming to Helen Sixtu. So Kristeva and Sixtu. Later on, I'll come to Kristeva also. My next slide is on Julia Kristeva. So Helen Sixtu, she is still alive, and again, I'm a die-hard fan of Sixtu. I keep on quoting Sixtu at times. So Sixtu and Kristeva, they both believe that language is man-made and distinction is created the moment the child is exposed to this language. You say history. History means his story. All right. Now, like in Bengali, we have a word Thelebela. Thelebela means childhood. Now, childhood, a girl also has a childhood and a boy also has a childhood, but Thelebela, Thele means boy. Okay, beta. All right. Thele means boy. So you see, this is how a language network works. All right. Man, as man thinks, man is indestructible. By man, you actually mean human being, but you're always talking about man. So you see, this very language system is loaded with words which are typically male-oriented. Now we have to, according to Helen Sixtu, we have to find out these dark areas. And here Helen Sixtu talks about écriture féminine. See, I have mentioned the word écriture féminine. All right. Now, écriture féminine, she says, clearly is that part of the language where a child is not conscious of the language, That means she takes us to that ideal state when the child is actually comfortable with the mother's language, all right, where the child is actually babbling nonsensical words, where the child is actually aware of the mother's warmth, So what she says is that we as women writers must write more and more about the babbles of the child, about what a mother feels, when she hears a child in her womb, remember? And also the experience of women, which are typically felt by women, and issues of women's body. And she says that so in literature, you have to bring a sort of fluidity. I'll tell you, Helen Sixto herself is a writer, all right, and she does that. She, if you read her Laughter of Medusa, and there are many other writings of her, so you will find that she tries to bring that fluidity in writing. She is against prose system. That's all right. And she says this fluid system can be more and more brought by poetry. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? So will you? So all women have to write poems? No. Even in prose, bring poetry. All right. Break logic system. Disrupt logic, because logic is where logic has been created by the male dominant society. You have to be illogical. You have to be nonsensical to make sense of your identity. And here the fluidity has to be acknowledged. All right. So this is what Sixto has to say. Now coming to Julia Kristeva. Yeah, she is Kristeva, so she's also alive. I told you that they are now almost contemporary to us. So Kristeva divides language. I have this slide for you. See, I told you that Lacanian language would be of great help to us. Kristeva, she clearly divides language into two interdependent aspects. I hope my slide is clear. And that is, she breaks language into semiotic and symbolic. See, Kristeva directly takes the symbolic word from Lacan. All right, it is just a clear copying of Lacan. And here she coins a new word called semiotic. Now, with semiotic stage, she equates imaginary and mirror stage. Oh, the bracket should close over there. That's my typological error. All right. So semiotic stage is equated with imaginary and mirror stage, bracket close. And on the other hand, we have the symbolic stage. All right. Remember symbolic stage. By the time a child reaches a symbolic stage, it is already 18 months plus, and the child is now able to relate to the laws of father, the language of father. All right, the society made by father. And slowly there's a sort of, an intellectual and a biological and a sort of a physical detachment from the mother. Okay. Now, semiotic stage is equated with poetry. This is not what I said, this is what Kristeva says. And symbolic stage is equated with prose. So when you write more and more poetry, by poetry I mean the fluidity of poetry. I do not mean that all women have to write poems. No. By poetry, that is what even Kristeva was saying. Sorry, Sixto was saying. So by poetry, I mean literature where more and more poetic fluidity should be there. And parallelly, if you are into the symbolic stage, you are writing more and more prose. Prose means solid syntax, closed sentences, closed ideas. But poetry means fluidity. It can take you from one place to another, in a moment. It can challenge logic. It can break grammar. So poetry can do all these things. Prose cannot. From poetry, you see, when you come to the semiotic stage, from semiotic you lead to poetry, and poetry leads to genotext. Genotext means texts which are talking of the woman. All right. And here, please, worthy participants, genotext does not mean that only a woman can write a genotext. A male person, and here Kristeva herself would say, give example of Mallarme. All right, Mallarme is a French writer, and she says that, see, Mallarme how beautifully writes about genotext. And on the other hand, when you write about prose, you have the phenotext. All right, phenotext means talking more and more about the father language, patriarchy. And genotext will give more space to the body of the mother, while phenotext would give more text to body of the father. And here Kristeva clearly says that symbolic stage, this prose, phenotext, body of the father, you keep on harping on it. This has to be disrupted. This has to be challenged. Phenotext has to be ruptured. And for this, what should we do? Both male, this is our responsibility. Participants, please remember, we as male and female writers should practice more and more phenotext. And example is as I'm so sorry, this is a very silly typographical mistake. It's not post-mortem writing. It's due to the auto text. It's post-modern writing. I'm so sorry. It's not post-mortem. It's post-modern. Post-modern. Is it clear? Can I have an audible answer, please? Please, one yes from an audio.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes,
Thank you,
ma'am.
thank you,
Yes.
thank you. Yeah. Please, my worthy participants, it's not post-mortem, it's post-modern and avant-garde writing. So, right, avant-garde means experimental writing. So these are very important, and Kristeva talks more and more about genotext and not phenotext. Yeah. Now I come to my third and the last French feminist, who is Irigaray. And as you see, Irigaray, she too, she hates Freud because of his male chauvinism, because of his theory of penis envy. And she also, I'm talking about Irigaray, where she is actually, parallel in her views with the other French feminists, where she also says that Liège language is phallocentric, and she also supports écriture féminine. But the fourth point, which is very important, see, these are her works, all right, Irigaray's work between East and West and all these texts. Now, Irigaray also, and I'm sure all women would, equate this with me, but it's a bit difficult to actually practice this in moment of pandemic situation. Yes, she harps on the fact of touch therapy. Women, they do not need solution, to their problems. They already know the solution. They need touch. And here she points out that it's not the it's not the sexuality of text that is important. Sexuality of text which is important. What is important is textuality of text. All right, and she harps on the importance of touch. So that is where Irigaray's contribution to theory is. She talks about the theory of sensitivity, how women are sensitive, how woman mind, she actually scientifically proves that woman mind is sensitive to touch. All right, they cure with touch therapy. And we have our next. Oh, I'm sorry. I just have another feminist. She is my last feminist of the second wave feminism, and the French feminist, and she is Alice Jardine. And as you see, she talks about gynesis. And I hope you understand the word very gynesis is actually, you can just, in short, we can say gynesis is equal to gynocriticism plus genotext. What is that? I mean, here you have gynocritics on one hand and you have gynotext on the other hand. Now, please remember once more, we are not in the era of Kate Millett. A man can be a gynocritic, a transgender can be a gynocritic, a man can evolve genotext, a transgender can evolve genotext. All right. So Kristeva's opinion is, of course, accepted by Alice Jardine, but then she moves on and she gives again focus to opinion of this process of gynesis. All right, this is very important. I think I don't know how much time I have taken. I'll just take some few more minutes of yours. I hope you are getting too restless because you can't see my face, neither I can see yours. Yeah, and I'll soon wrap up. Now now I told you I would be talking about now I'm almost coming out of now second wave feminist. I have come out of a French feminist. Here I am to talk about now Black feminism. And here we have this beautiful woman called Alice Walker. All right. And Alice Walker talks about feminism. Now tell me, when feminists were talking about women, why does suddenly Alice Walker come up with womanism or so-called Black feminism? Why? Because I was talking about American writers, I was talking about Anglo-American critics, I was talking about French critics. But Alice Walker says, hey, women, you all are white and you are not acknowledging our problem. We have problem with our wages. We have problem with the way you are doubly marginalizing us. We have problem with the civil rights movements in America. And finally, we have to organize under the umbrella of non-white feminism. All right. And so we need to evolve and we need to talk more and more about we, the Black people. Black people means Black women. We need to bring back our own suppressed oral culture, folklore, songs, all right? And if you read Maya Angelou, if I have time, I will finish with a poem by Maya Angelou. All right, in Maya Angelou's, I don't have a slide of Maya Angelou. She has a beautiful text called "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings." All right. So what this Black feminists say is that, all right, white feminists, you are talking a lot about feminism, but where are we, the Black women? Right. So we have been silenced by you too. The patriarchy has silenced us. You as white feminists have silenced us. Now where are we? So that's why is the need of Black feminism. Right. If I have time, and if you wish to hear, I would certainly read out a poem for you by Maya Angelou. Okay. Now, again, we have this. So this is something where I think I, as a South Asian, even have to do. I mean, I have personally met Spivak. Personally, I have, I know Spivak. And she knows me too. So you see, we come to another thread of contemporary feminism, and they are post-colonial or that is slash third world feminism. We have on the left Sara Suleri. I hope you can see Sara Suleri. Yeah, and on the right we have this beautiful old woman called Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. All right, she is a Bengali student of presidency, Chakraborty. Then she married and acquired this surname Spivak. So now these two women, they say that we as South Asians, no, what they say is that, well, yes, patriarchy is dominating us, but white feminists, you are talking about white feminism. Now, Black feminists, you are talking about your folklore, your culture. Where are we? And as you all know, Spivak is important for her, the subaltern studies, She says a subaltern can never speak up on their own, of their own, for their own. Okay, so they are very much contemporary. They are both talking about not only British patriarchy, but also about Indian patriarchy. So they say that we are doubly, trebly marginalized. We are, in a condition where we, as post-colonial, who have, social South Asians, we have to talk about our own literature, about our own subject position, about our own identity. Right. Now, moving on to my next slide, it is about the lesbian feminist criticism. You see, now lesbian feminist criticism, I have tried to give you a small quote. Are you trying to uphold oppressive binary gender standards? Because that's how you uphold oppressive binary gender standards, So this is a very intriguing quote by one of them. Now, clearly, lesbian feminist critics. Now, what are they? All right. Now, they are the feminists who say that you, feminists, be it French feminists, be it Black feminists, be it, third world feminists, you all are talking like men. All right. And you think that this world is heterosexual and this is abnormal. They believe, lesbian feminists believe that lesbians are normal. All right. Only a woman can be a true partner of another woman. So they are that strong. But please let me tell you, my duty is to present all, sides of feminism. It doesn't mean that I too think about it. But I'll at least mention one very important, lesbian feminist critic. Yes, I don't have a slide for her. She's Zimmerman. Now, Zimmerman, oh yes, I think, yeah, I have the text, The Safety of Women, you see, by Bonnie Zimmerman. Now, Zimmerman is also a lesbian feminist critic, but she thinks it's not always the physical, sexual contact of a woman and woman. What she thinks, and I think what even I and Christy also think, that a woman can be a very good friend of another woman, because of certain, at the end of the day, anxieties and stress that two women face together. It need not be physical, but it can be intellectual and psychological. Now that is where I prefer Zimmerman's idea of this female friendship. Well, and there comes my next slide. Now here we have as if arrived to post-feminist era. Now what is post-feminist era? Post-feminism thinks that yes, we have come to that place where women have got their rights. All right. Now, women have got their rights. You, as women, I'm sure all women who are now participating in the FDP, you all have a job. You are financially, already in power. You have the right. So, what is your next step? What is your next responsibility? How to use this right? You are in a privileged position now. So post-feminism believes that yes, we have already, come at par with male, where man and woman go hand in hand together. And here, of course, we should banish femocrats from our society. You know what is femocrat? Means, oh God, look at me just because I'm a woman. Look at me just because I'm talking about a woman body. These are femocrats who misuse the position of feminism, who think that you have to give attention to a woman just because she is woman. You know who are femocrats? Femocrat is a woman who talks about women, quota. All right. So this should be the woman quota in your college admission. So you should have some women seats in the bus, So you should have a woman compartment. All right. So just because you are a woman, you need attention, you need rights. They are femocrats. And post-feminism believes that such femocrats should be put out of the context. All right. And post-feminism believes that you have the right. Now you have to empower yourself. So now follows the moment of women empowerment. You see, almost all economists, all students of political science, almost all interdisciplinary people are talking about empowerment of women. So that is about post-feminism. All right, and it is still there. But I end my PPT with this. Now, please take some time for this. This is stop and think. Feminism during COVID-19. All right. Now, I'll be going back. I'll be closing the PPT. But first, please take a look. I'll tell you, my husband is very angry with this. Because he thinks I have done thorough injustice to whatever he's doing for the home. Now, this may vary, from place to place. But still, this is the place where I would definitely seek your. I told you that feminism is evolving. Maybe today, we are standing at the threshold of COVID-19, and I really want to know what is your, understanding of feminism, especially within the context of COVID-19 pandemic situation. All right, I will stop my PPT over here and I will go back to my Zoom class. Am I audible? Can I be seen?
Yes, ma'am. You can proceed now.
Okay. Yes, Nilanjana. You
hi,
are
Christy.
visible.
All
yes.
right, I'm visible. Christy, how much time have I exactly taken? I have no idea.
You've taken an hour, more than an hour.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have almost lulled all my participants. So,
yes.
I was,
you have a question. You have a question.
Pardon?
Well, the question is from Sonia. So she asked that how come Indian feminism, how does it is similar and differs from Western feminism?
Oh yes, very important question. See, feminism, because I come, I'm a lover of literature. I won't say I teach literature. I am a student of literature. So if you think about Indian women who were writing, who were writing in the pre-independence stage, then came independence, and in the post-independence stage. Let us talk about Sarojini Naidu, Kamala Das, all right. And later on, we can come to Arundhati Roy and so many women, feminists. Now, these women, for the first time, now there are certain similarity with the Western women. For example, here too, they had to fight in terms of literature, in terms of society, economics, everywhere, they wanted this intellectual acknowledgement. And trust me, even as an Indian woman today, I have to hear from my male colleagues. So students, they just go to see you. Then they are not interested in your class. And that hits me like a slap. All right. So the moment you are telling me that you are acknowledging my body and my beauty in workspace, I feel that that is a sort of not acknowledging my work, because here this is my workspace. Please acknowledge my intellectual labor, not my physical beauty. Number one. Now this is almost like the Western, certain places are the same. But as Indian writer, here we are now. Just I'm talking about Spivak. All right. Now think about Indian women. What Indian women are we going to talk about? I myself, who am Indian woman, and I'm talking about feminism. I am in a privileged position. Think about the Dalit woman. Think about the woman who has to do all her woman chores and then go and outside and has to also do all the work outside. So even if you see Mahasweta Devi, and even Spivak later translates Mahasweta Devi, where she talks about breast stories, where she says, clearly that women, even the Dalit woman, every woman, we all have in India itself. I am not a subaltern. I am Indian woman. I am privileged. And still I am doubly, if you talk about post-colonial era, I have been doubly marginalized. First by Western society and then by Indian patriarchy. Number one. All right. If you have you heard of Partho Chatterjee? Partho Chatterjee talks about this Bhadra Mahila concept, where a Bhadralok, that is a male, nationalist, tells you how a nationalist woman must evolve. So they clearly separate home and the world. World is for us and home is for you, woman. You try to, keep the spirituality of your home intact. I mean, I know, that is what it is. But even talking about Dalit women, I'll tell you the way they undergo, immense exploitation, the way they have been raped, even within the police custody. So this is again, a very different aspect. So that's how I would like to put Indian feminism into context.
Nilachana, another question.
Yes.
From Deban Das. So he's asking that, is black feminism is prevailing in India?
See, black feminism had, do you actually see, basically black feminism is about the women who are actually talking about, who are the black writers, for example, Alice Walker and Maya Angelou. But are you actually, harping on the word black? I mean, does he, or I think he's he. Devin?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think he is harping on the word black, right?
Yeah.
So the black feminism as such is womanism, and here clearly we have the third world, the post-colonial again writers who say black feminists. You are also not talking about us, because I clearly told you black feminists are talking about their folklore, about their oral culture, about their hidden culture, exploring their intricate culture. Nobody is talking about Indian oral culture, Indian mythology, right? But yes, black is a color that actually haunts every woman these days. That's how we have been produced. I told you, sex object. I told you, you have to become, male gaze. Look at this advertisement company, Fair and Lovely. Still now nobody has stopped this company. And this Fair and Lovely for ages have, and if you see this advertisement, if you just go through last 30 years of advertisement, first 10 years they used to show that you'd get a handsome husband. Second 10 years they used to show that now you can enter into a new job, and then you can get married. And in the recent years they say only do off with marriage, you can just be established if you use Fair and Lovely. It brings confidence in you. So this black itself, but again, please don't mix it up with black feminism. It's a different school altogether. But if you're harping on the word black, yes, still now discrimination is being made on the basis of color. But at the same time, if you look from the Western angle, we are still brown in color, brown or yellow. Brown, I think. Yellow is for, the Chinese and all the Japanese. So we are brown in color from their perspective.
Yeah. Another question is like, from Dr. Suleka Jadum. So he's asking that, dear Dr. Nilanjana, putting aside all these theories, what is
Yeah.
your view on the practical ground?
Yeah.
Don't you think that somewhere or other these theories are dismantling the family system?
I think they are empowering the family system.
Is.
I think they are not dismantling, but they are empowering. I told you, as I told you, a friend. I mean, see, the very moment you talk about family system and dismantling family system, dear participant, one who has asked me this question, you are immediately thinking of a power system, and you are afraid of the fact that this power is challenged. By power system, I mean a fact that the father is going to speak and the mother is going to listen. But of course, there can be a space where both can talk, not just talk, they both can yell at each other. Let us hit each other, let us blow each other. That's not breaking the family. That's how I think. That's how I think relationship works. The moment you are thinking of family, you are actually thinking in terms of power. But feminism is about breaking this power. I'll tell you one thing. Suppose there are two families inside your house. A male partner beats a woman partner. Maybe the male partner's brother is the first one to hit his brother back. How dare you beat your wife? All right. So that male partner at that point of time is a feminist. Your brother can be a feminist. Your sister can be a feminist. Your grandfather can be a feminist.
Nilanjan, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
a question. Sorry to interrupt, but as you're saying, that is very, 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 very rare. I hope women are, even the brothers. When you see my families and all, my grandmother or my mother, even still now, we are supposed to eat after our uncles or my husband. Yes,
Yes.
but my husband might not prefer it, but we are forced into it. And where is this building up when it comes up? I agree with ma'am Sulekha ma'am. Certain families, when your hand is up as a feminist, it is literally breaking the family bond, especially the bond between a husband and wife. I think that is what is building a family. So when I am talking, you have to cook or you have to wash. I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking in general. Literally, that is where the family is breaking, and you have a lot of divorce happening. So where the feminism lies there.
Yeah. But divorce sometimes doesn't happen because of this. Maybe there. I mean, I'll tell you again. We are then. So much of talking. It really then leads to nothing because again we are fixing ourselves into gendered roles. Is this good? I mean, is domestic stores only made for women? Which book has said about this? From where do you get this idea? Again, you are making stereotypes. And you know what's the most dangerous part? Because the moment you stereotype a male domain, you also stereotype a female domain. I mean, when you say cooking is for women, suppose there's a man who loves to cook in your house. You say, no, 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 no cooking today. The guests are going to come. Only woman is going to cook. You go out of my house. This is also, suppose there's a brother and a sister. The brother, suppose he has to study, but he is always given extra work. That is, you have to earn first in the home. You are the only son in the house. You have to go and take care of your sister. Your elder sister has gone to her tutorial class. Go and bring her back. So when the moment you create such pockets of genders, you actually are breaking the family. The divorce has taken only then. And also it varies. It really varies from place to place. I mean, when my mother-in-law actually says that first let your husband have the food, because now we are talking about personal things. My husband is the first one to shout. I come back at my home at 5 o'clock in the evening, and my husband comes at 2:30. So by that time, my lunch is ready. It's in the microwave. I won't be microwave and eat it. I mean, he's the one to serve the food for me. These things happen. All right. Now, and I'll tell you one thing. I'll quote my mother-in-law. She has said this is a very personal, confession I'm making to you, Christy, and to all the participants. She has said, "You have turned my husband into a lady."
Yes.
But my husband
that's what I'm saying.
My
No,
husband
you know, my
is proud of
husbands
it.
or men love to help women, but you know, they are the
Yeah,
stereotype in our society
yeah,
is what women,
yeah,
husbands should not cook.
yeah.
You know,
And I
that's
tell
a
you, my
female
father,
thing.
yeah, my father is a better feminist than my mother. My father was the one,
But
when I was,
don't you think, Kunilanchana, when women, when women are given that thing, you know, don't they undertreat men, or don't they project it in a wrong manner, in a wrong way, I
under, if
suppose?
it is under treatment, then there is feminism not taking place.
Yeah,
Feminism,
yeah,
I
yeah.
told you, is about equality.
Yes,
Where
that's what.
it's not, again, it's not matriarchy. It's not my position. Again, now I become the father, I become the power, and you become the powerless. It's about empowering both, walking hand in hand as comrades. I'll tell you, I'll just give you one small. When I was growing up, in our adolescence, when your mother first time brings a dupatta and says, use it, my father was the one. He said, no, 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 don't give dupatta to her because she will be riding the bicycle. If something happens to the spokes, if this gets entangled with the spokes, she will fall. So he had this basic thing, dupatta to hide what? She is going out in the world. She is riding a bicycle. Don't give her dupatta. So this basic urge of my father, because he was never thinking in terms of a boy or a girl. He was just thinking of a human being who was riding a cycle, and a dupatta may just crush her into a body. So my father is a better feminist than my mother, I said.
Hello, ma'am. Sorry to disturb you. Please, am I audible?
Yes, sir, very much. I can also see you.
My question is this, ma'am. The session is very much, you can say, scholarly, but the question is, are you phenotextual or genotextual in your approach?
Genotextual.
Pardon?
Genotextual. Genotext.
Genotextual.
Yeah. Why
Okay, thank
phenotext? Tell me. Because
you.
I'll
Thanks.
tell you. I'll tell you why. Because genotext is talking about, a text where woman experience is to be shared. I mean, see, I'll tell you, you must have your experience with your mother. I was talking about that age when you had that eternal, relationship with your mother, where you felt you and your mother had that bonding. But slowly, as you enter into this male world, you forget to accept her mind and her body. So, creating those texts, those warmth of women's art, those experiences typical of women, and even a male writer can write about it. Malarm is writing about it.
Ma'am, second question is that, sorry, second question is that so many webinars,
Sir, just a
seminars,
minute. Sir, may I have your name? I don't know your name.
Dr. Rajan Lal, Assistant Professor of English, JS Hindu College, Amroha, UP.
Okay, you're from UP. Oh, hello, sir.
Ma'am. I'm just seeing so many webinars are there, seminars are there, and
Yeah.
different programs there. But there is a majority of male members rather than ladies. So, our Indian women are in equal position of post feminism or not?
No,
Dr. Rajalal, I can speak on this, I think. This FTP you can take as an example. We have many female speakers, including me. I'm organizing, and there are a bunch number of female speakers, and we have only 2 or 3 male speakers, 4 female speakers. Again, we are organizing an FTP only with female speakers.
So that's why, ma'am. So, ma'am, that's why this is pseudo feminism.
Why, sir?
Majority of male speakers and asking questions there rather than female participants.
Sir,
So
but
I
that is
think
what.
this is pseudo feminism, really speaking.
No, sir. I think Christy was trying to point out that here in this very FDP program, we have a lot of women, participants. And sir, if I can't see you anymore, I don't know why, but please make yourself visible.
Actually,
I
I
really
joined the
want to look at
webinar
you.
later on.
Yeah, sir. I'll tell you one thing. You are from UP, right? And I am from West Bengal. Now the place is not very far. Just try to see the way women are now entering into school level, school SSC, school service commission, college service commission. Look how many women participants are, and it doesn't depend upon woman quota. I hate democrats. All right. So you see how women are now talking. You see women pilots, you see women everywhere. Women ticket collectors, women Ola cab drivers, sir.
Ma'am, this is the effort on the side of yours, but I think patriarchy is not very easily allowing you.
No, sir, it is now allowing. It is now allowing. Every father in the house want their child or the daughter to be equipped. None of the
Yes.
parents doesn't want their child to get married at age of 15. As if I know, 70% of fathers who have, are allowing their daughters to study and to work and to get married at a later age. I've been to UK, and where I've seen women have been, getting kids by the age of 18 to 25. But I see here where women are marrying up after 25. They are choosing when they need to get married, and they are planning when they need to get a child. I hope rather than the Western, India is going forward. When I have seen personally in Britain, UK, literally 18-year-old women are having child and they're getting married at a younger age. Whereas where are we now? We are moving forward. This is, yeah.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
No, sir, please don't go. I want to tell you something.
Okay.
Sir, can I have you once more? Sir,
Pardon,
sir, I
ma'am?
just want to, yeah, hello, sir, I can see you now. Sir, what I want to tell you is that thank you so much being a man. You are talking about patriarchy. You are a feminist, and society needs feminists like you. Thank you so much. There from UP, you are talking about women participants. You are talking about patriarchy. First of all, kudos to you. I mean, there must be such kind of upbringing in your house. Your mother must have, such way, I think tutored you to think about, patriarchy in a negative term, because patriarchy is most convenient for you. You are the one who would be benefited by patriarchy. But on the other hand, you are talking against patriarchy. So kudos to you, first of all. Second of all, sir, I think feminism is something, it is a right which a man cannot give me. I have to achieve of my own. Right can never be given to anybody. Right
Yes,
is not.
ma'am. That's why.
So
Yes,
right has to be won. Right? So that's what I'm talking, that this is the time of empowering. I have the right. I have a salary. I work in a government college. Now, what to do with the salary? That's the question. What to
Okay, ma'am.
do with this power? That's
Yes.
the question.
Yes. Now, I
Christy
think,
ma'am,
yes.
sorry, one question more. Because,
we have another FTP by 1:30, sir, and I need to
ma'am,
wind up.
please. Actually, I am joining this session because of you only. You are so lenient. One question is that when our daughter, I am the father of 2 daughters.
Oh, congratulations, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. There is
What's
no
the
problem.
names of your daughters?
Aishwarya,
Wow.
Aishwarya Prabha and Vishwendri Chaudhary.
Aishwarya and Vishwendri. Wow, beautiful names. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Selected by myself,
Oh, wonderful.
not by any priest or pandit.
Thank you. Lucky wife and lucky mother.
Ma'am, this is feminism or patriarchal thinking? Selecting the names of daughters by their own father.
But if you have discussed with your wife, it is feminism.
Christy, bang on.
But so vibrant session. My question was that even when we send our daughter outside or sister outside, there is a phobia in our heart and
Yes.
minds.
Yes.
So
Yes, sir.
what?
Sir, but I'll tell you, this phobia is not because your sister is going out or your daughter is going out. It's because of the outside world. So if you have to change anything, it's the outside world. Instead of asking your daughter that don't travel at midnight, try to make Uttar Pradesh at midnight safe for women. Women
Yes.
is not doing anything. I'll tell you one
Everybody-
thing.
Nirvya,
Even-
everybody knows Nirvya case.
Yes, sir. And one of my students had asked me, ma'am, the way we dress up, it is actually provoking men. But I tell you, sir, one small thing. Even if I walk naked on the road, nobody has the right to rape me. It is my right to body. It's my fundamental right.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
not
Yes.
provoking anybody. It is my
So I-
funda, and you as a father can understand. It's your, you have given birth to 2 bodies of women. It's their right to body. It's their right to exist. It's their right to live. Even if you walk naked on the street, nobody has the right to rape me. As simple as that. So
Thank
please,
you, ma'am.
Hello.
the
Yes.
world has to be made ready for it.
I would like to get concluded. When you have some issues on with feminism, a lot of controversial ideas pop up, and I would like to conclude like that. Conclude our FTP today by saying that feminism starts not only with women or men, it starts when a baby is born. Either it's a boy or a girl. So you need to
Exactly,
teach
ma'am.
them. You need to teach the boy that you need to respect women, and doing household chores are not. It is not only for men or women. And I think, as Nilanjana said, I think that was Priyanka Chopra who said that, if I walk naked on the road, it is my fundamental right. But okay, I'm very much a bit against that. Why I think is we have some, everybody has to have certain responsibility. When you come out of that responsibility, and you have your own role to play in, a father's role or a mother's role or a brother or a friend, everybody have a responsibility to protect women and to respect women.
But Christy, think about a mad woman. You
Yeah.
see mad women who are moving around naked on the street.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The responsibility which
Yeah,
we have to
yeah,
respect
so
women,
do you
what
have the
what
right?
they are.
Yeah,
Yes.
do you have the right, but just because I'm not wearing a dupatta, does a man have the right
That
to
is,
molest
yeah,
me
I'm
and
not
grope me?
against it. I'm not
Yes,
against
ma'am.
it, but you need to have some decorum. I say, purposely, I have seen women saying that I would be going like this, for a drunken party or something like that. We know what we are. So I'm a bit, we need to have a decorum, either men or women.
Both.
I'm not
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
reality. I'm not just talking about, when you go and dance in a public, drinking and dancing on the road, that doesn't come under feminism. That's what I say. We need to have our own respect, where ultimately we need to have, boys should be taught. I teach my son. Your thing
Yeah.
is to see women
Yeah,
like that.
absolutely. A
Yes.
son has to be taught how to,
So that's what.
yeah,
And we
acknowledge
would be,
women.
yeah, we are again having another, and we are going to have another again. Nilanjana has given an introduction on feminism. Again, tomorrow, I think tomorrow, so Sunita Reddy ma'am is going to delve deeper into this feminism. So thank you, Nilanjana. Honey, I
you.
would say she's my wonderful best friend,
Yeah.
a short time best friend.
Yes.
And I thank you, Nilanjana. It was a wonderful, wonderful session. Thank you. Thank you so much. I thank all the participants. And I have
Thank you.
given the chat link. You can please can come into a group so that I can share the presentation certificate over in the group itself. So you
Wow.
can, it is very difficult for me to every time, get into email and type. We have a lot of work. So please join the WhatsApp group. It's not for chatting, it's only for sharing information. Thank you,
Christy.
one and all.
Thank you,
Dr.
Christy, for
Nilanjana
having me.
Dr. Nilanjana ji,
Yes, sir.
I wish that there should be a special session on Indian feminism.
Oh, yes. Christy must be having this for our next FDP. Christy?
Yes.
You're already getting ideas on
Yeah.
Indian feminism.
Yes.
Indian feminism theory and literature.
That should be in detail, and then just like be an
Yeah, we are
exploration.
planning. Yes, we are planning for another webinar next month. So we will be asking all the participants from the international. We have two groups, so we would be asking which topic you're like, because we are having a group of people who love to listen to this. Who love to gain knowledge. So that's the reason we are choosing. I got 2,000 registrations, but I've chosen only 150 for my group. So 250 people together, you can choose. I will be asking a poll, and you can choose what kind of topic you all want. And definitely we would be having such a webinar on July, because more than, we have a lot of enriching people over here. So definitely we would be enlightened. So I would be sharing that again. Thank you, Nilanjana. Nilanjana would be part of it. And, she's again going to be a part of again another session where all women are there. It's not, it's planning. It's planned by Tijels, Benison sir's thing. So it's yet to come.
That's a surprise.
Yes.
Thank you,
Christy. Thank you so much. Thank you, participants. We have another FD by 1:30, so we have to get ready. Thank you. So please fill the feedback form. I'll be posting it in the group as well. Now, please do take the link from the chat, and you can be benefited. Thank you.
You
Thank
can
you so
also
much.
share my PPT with them. I've given it to you if they want.
You mailed me. I will do it. All those things, together. I will put it in the group. It's very difficult for me to do it by mail. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nilanjana. And thank you, participants. Yeah, tomorrow we will meet. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah, bye. Yeah, bye. Thank you.